Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, here again to bring you how to analyze your own Holy Priest logs in 7.1.5. So the patch just dropped, and I know a lot of people had questions about what their logs should be looking like and how to maximize their own HPS with the new Piety and Benediction that we're going to be running. So I had a great week in the Mythics, and I wanted to kind of take the time, go over my own logs, and kind of show you guys little things here and there that you may not have noticed of just how you can maximize your own HPS. So I always do coaching streams and stuff like that on Fridays, usually. And they're open to everybody, but I always give the subscribers to my Twitch channel priority. But in case you're not able to make those, I wanted to put this video together for you guys. So I want to look at Mythic Cenarius and Mythic Helia for my own logs and point out some of the big things that you can focus on and where to really look to find all the information. So pulling up the logs, clicking on my character. Going to go to our summary first. Summary will show you all your stats, all your talents, your artifact traits, your gear, everything you could possibly look for, and can also point out a number of things. So, for example, starting with my stats, I started gemming some crits, mainly because I just wanted to see how it would work out and things like that going into the new patch, and it's actually been working out pretty well, having a nice balance around the mid-30s of mastery and crit, and then getting into the high teens with haste roundabout. I have quite a bit of versatility because I'm running with the Arcano Crystal. So my trinkets, I'm running double throughput trinkets. I'm running Brine Water Slime, and I'm running our Arcano Crystal. This is a very short fight. It's 3.5 minutes when we're doing our split mythic runs. So we have half our mains, half our alts. So it's a pretty quick run. It would be even faster if we had all our mains. So I don't really need that much mana, and I'm in to burn all my mana as fast as possible in this fight. So I have Zanshi, the legendary cloak with the auto res, and I have Pridaz as my legendaries. Of course, you can see my gems, my relics, the works. And of course, Benediction, Divinity, Piety, Light of the Naru, Afterlife, Angelic Feather, and Trail of Light are the preferred talents. You're probably going to be running these all the time. At least that would be my personal suggestion, be running them all the time. Now let's get into our healing. So looking at overall healing first, you're looking at your overheal right here in our rankings. But our overheal for the entire raid was about 32%. My personal overheal was about 28%. So it's nice when you're below average on overhealing. It's quite nice, especially if you're beating other people. And looking at our healing breakdown. Now, this is going to be an approximation of what your healing breakdown will look like for most people. It's not going to be set in stone. It's not going to be perfect. And a lot of times you have to look at how effective some spells are over others in certain situations. One of the examples is Prayer of Healing. So I only used Prayer of Healing once in this fight, but it only overhealed by 17%. Because Prayer of Healing now is targeting close people rather than the most injured people, it has a higher penchant for overhealing, unfortunately. So you have to be very, very careful with how you're using the ability and just being as careful as possible. So if you look at the breakdown here, it healed Eiffel for almost 2k. But he was the nearest person and injured, and yeah, kind of sucks. Kind of sucks with that. So you have to be sure that you're using it when everybody's taking damage, whenever possible. So having under 20% overheal, you should be pretty fine. But just making sure that you're being very, very careful with using this spell. Because it's very costly. It can do a ton of healing, but you just have to make sure that you're efficient with it. So one of the things I always look at first is your cast per minute. So if you click off yourself and you go to the whole list of everybody's casts on the cast tab right here, scroll down. Holy Priests don't have as high of a cast per minute as most other classes do. So you'll generally be at the bottom. I have 42 casts per minute here. This is just showing how many actions am I taking. The more buttons you're pushing, the more likely you're going to be healing for more. Usually my cast per minute's around 35. Ish. So in this fight, it's a very short fight, so I'm able to just kind of go crazy, have my fastest casting abilities, spam, 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 all that good stuff. So I'm at 42, which is awesome. It's fantastic. But generally, you're going to see, and you'll probably see it on Helia as well, where your mid-30s is kind of the thing you want to shoot for. And longer fights will have a longer, or you'll have a lower cast per minute over the course of longer fights, because you have movement and transitions and all this other stuff. So biggest things to look at when you have your specific casts, looking at what abilities you're casting, is Prayer of Mending. We are so tied to Prayer of Mending and using Prayer of Mending on cooldown. So I'm going to check all the boxes to show who I casted it on, because Cenarius is a fight where your prayer of mendings are consumed almost instantly. Just cast it on anybody. I usually prefer casting it on the tanks, but on fights like this, you can just cast it on anybody. And what you want to see is you want to see consistent gaps in between your prayer of mendings, which shows that you're using it as close as you can on cooldown. So if you see any other big gaps, like this is a pretty small gap, you know, at 45 seconds I get the cast off, and then I cast it at 55 seconds, you know, so it's 9-ish seconds, or, you know, there's a little bit in between of it's on cooldown, I'm casting the ability, cast finishes, it's on cooldown now, right? So there's not only the cooldown of it, which is around 8 seconds for most people now, but there's the second-ish wind-up of you actually casting the spell before the spell goes on cooldown. So you want to see consistency in the gaps. You always just want to see consistency, so this is a little bit wider of a gap than normal, so this is about 2:13, and this is about 2 minutes even. So there's a tiny bit of gap, so I had to move, or something was happening, or maybe I just forgot, so it delays it a little bit. So those can kind of add up over the course of the fight, and you can miss 1 or 2 prayer of mendings as a result. So just keep an eye on that. Consistency is the goal with this. You want to have consistent gaps every single time, using it as best as you can. You can see the same things with your holy words, but your holy words are not always set in stone with using them on cooldown no matter what. Sometimes you might have to wait a second or two, so it'll happen. So for the first 30, 40 seconds of the fight, there's really not enough damage for me to justify using a Serenity, for example. But after that, I need as many as I can get. So keep that in mind. With your resources tab right next to the cast tab, you'll start with your HP, and then of course you drop down to your mana. And you can look right here over your mana cast, or your consumption of mana over the course of the fight, and how quickly you really can drop mana very quickly. So you'll see right here, I'm dropping mana, dropping mana, dropping mana. Right here is where I go Angel form, and I'm only regenning mana. Usually you don't regen any mana when you're in Angel form, but because I have Greater Blessing of Wisdom from a Paladin, I am regenning mana over the course of my Angel form, which is quite nice. So I'm regenning some mana there, and then I'm dropping really low, and then I spike up again with my mana potion, and then I finish the fight. So ideally you want to have it where you finish the fights with as little mana as possible, but then you also don't go So ideally, if I'm around this situation, I don't want to be that low, and I think if you're able to spread out some of your mana consumption earlier in the fight and have it for later on, that's preferable. So I could have paced myself a little bit better here. It kind of depends on the encounters. You just have to be mindful of it as best as you can. Try to pace yourself so you're not running and then make sure you're using all your mana. Now, if I'm looking at my healing breakdown, of course, this is going to be an approximation for most people. It's not going to be, you won't carbon copy this onto everybody's, but you'll be able to look at things like Light of Toure, how often you're using that. Ideally, you want to keep it on the tanks, but again, on some of these fights where there's tons of damage on everybody, for instance, I used it on our Shadow Priest twice. Because our Shadow Priest was dealing tons and tons of damage to himself, so having a nice buff for him was preferable at that time, because at that moment he's taking much more damage than a tank is, or much spikier damage, so I'd have to be topping it off quicker. So it kind of varies in that aspect, but generally speaking, you want to be using Light of Toure on the tanks whenever possible. For Divine Hymn, I got 1 Divine Hymn cast off. You'll see it as 5. 1 cast is equal to 5 because you'll have 5 pulses per casted Divine Hymn, so keep that in mind. And then you'll be able to see the overheal of it. So if you're under 30% overheal on Divine Hymn, it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. My overheal is not that bad at all in this fight, which is quite nice. So you'll see I have my Legendary Neck doing about 5.5 million. There's no overheal or anything like that. Desperate Prayer, now that it's baseline, did about 2 million. So using those very consistently. For me personally, I like to use Desperate Prayer immediately if I can. And just using it as consistently as possible for the HPS increase and stuff like that, and using my health potion for an emergency. So if I want to look at the efficiency of my spells, though, Divine Hymn, you zoom in on it, and I'm going to take off Echo of Light. So these are all different spells. This is all different spell colors. So I'm going to check off Echo of Light. So what we're going to see here is my Divine Hymn, how I set up for it, and how I'm using my artifact traits to the max efficiency. So ideally, you always want to use a holy word before you Divine Hymn to get the divinity buff for your Divine Hymn, for most of the ticks of your Divine Hymn. So right here, I use Sanctify beforehand, and I already have Prayer of Mendings out, and how I have Prayer of Mendings out is demonstrated by this purple little layer. So, of course, with Renew the Faith, your Prayer of Mendings just jump all over the place. They don't consume any charges. It's fantastic. It's super nice. And all these Prayer of Mendings are being buffed by the Divine Hymn buff. So, you'll see Prayer of Mendings jumping all over the place consistently over the course of the hymn, which is what you want to see. So you always want to see this layer. And then underneath that layer, you're going to see the green layer of Renew. That's going to be consistently there. And you'll kind of see it ramp up a little bit off the end of the hymn. And just be doing tons and tons of healing. So that's what you want to look at, is you always want to have a Prayer of Mending layer, and then you'll have a smaller layer of Renew underneath that. Every single time, as consistently as possible. So the ideal situation is you Prayer of Mending, you use a holy word as situation allows, then you Divine Hymn, and then you use another holy word after. Because the holy word after will be buffed by Divine Hymn. I used a Serenity beforehand, just to top somebody off. Top one of the tanks, I believe, off. So depending on the situation, it's not perfect, but that's ideally what you want to be going for with your Divine Hymns. And that's one situation of you want to maximize your efficiency in many situations. So if we're looking at just Prayer of Mending in general, like I said on this fight, it's in green. It's the green right there. This Prayer of Mending gets consumed so quickly in this fight, so you have to be very, very careful with how your setup for Divine Hymn is. You want to be able to get it off and make sure you have the Divine Hymn before the Prayer of Mending charges run out. Because again, you see this giant spike in Prayer of Mending healing just because I have it during the Divine Hymn, and then you have another upswell as the rest of the charges are being consumed. So you're saving so many Prayer of Mending charges. Again, I'm having so many Prayer of Mending charges that I'm getting for free. So over the course of this hymn, I'm getting 37 hits. If I zoom in even further, it's 27 hits just during the hymn itself. And I'm not wasting those charges, which is even better. So it's very, very strong. Piety Benediction is so, so powerful, and you want to be able to focus as best as you can on using Prayer of Mending on cooldown and getting the maximum value out of it. It's very, very important. Now, if I want to look at some of the quick things for Helia, again, it's kind of a similar situation where we rock it. But also, you're looking at Divine Hymn again. You're going to have, let me check off Echo of Light again. You're going to have that Prayer of Mending layer. This time it's in blue. And then in green again, beneath it we'll have the Renew layer beneath it. So light green is the Divine Hymn. The blue is Prayer of Mending. You have that layer beneath it. And then you have the Renews. So, and again, I have a Holy Word Sanctify used before. And then I have a Holy Word Serenity at the very end of the buff. Now, speaking of buffs, for both of these fights, what I wanted to show you, one of the things you want to look at is your buff up time for Divinity. That's how consistently you're using your Holy Words. So I'm at 41% here on Cenarius, and I'm at, let me get rid of the zoom first. And I'm at 30% for Helia. So Helia is a much longer fight, so you're going to end up spacing it out much, much more. Between your Holy Words, you're not going to be casting as consistently, you're not going to be casting as much. But on short fights, like our Cenarius 3-minute kill versus our Helia 8-minute kill, there's a world of difference. So generally you want to be like 30 to mid-30s on most fights. On shorter fights, it'll be higher, of course. But it'll just kind of depend on the encounters you're on and things like that. So I'm about 40% here. You can also look at your Blessing of Ture uptime. It always will be dependent on how much you're casting Flash Heal and how much crit that you have. So I'm at 25% on this fight. On Helia, it's going to be quite a bit lower. It's about 15%. So those are just things to watch out for, things to kind of keep in mind. The better uptime you can get on them, the more healing that you're going to be doing. So, of course, looking at your mana consumption on Helia, again, similar thing, except you'll see a flat line here, and this is where I'm using my Angel form, so I'm not regenning any mana, I'm not spending any mana, and right after that I'll have my potions reset, so I'll be able to use my potions again. So, you'll see Lay Torrent pots. The only time I'd really recommend you using Lay Torrent potions is on fights where there's not much damage happening. So you'll see I use Lay Torrent potion right here at about 2 minutes and 20 seconds, right? So the way that you see if this is worth using in this situation is you look at the damage taken tab, and then you look at, well, where is 2 minutes and 20 seconds? Well, 2 minutes and 20 seconds is where there's the lowest point of damage in the raid. There's no damage happening because that's when we run up to the towers. So I run right up to the tower and I start drinking. Well, that's the perfect time to use a late torn potion because there's no damage. So by the time I finish it, then the damage ramps up and then I'm casting abilities. So keep that in mind for when you're looking at a position, not only from your perspective when you're in the fray, in the fight, but also looking at logs after. Are you using late torn at a good time? Not only for you to not stand in garbage, but also for you to not miss out on healing. Otherwise, when you're trying to max out your healing, just use an instant mana potion. It's always, always very important. And again, you'll be able to take the similar situation of looking at your casts. We're going to look at it for Helia and checking off everybody. So this is a very long fight. Again, this is almost 8 minutes. And you're seeing very, very much consistency in between the Prayer of Many casts. It kind of tails off at the end because things get really helter-skelter at the end. But in general, I only have like 1 or 2 large gaps. But then the rest of the gaps are very tight. They're very, all the bars are tight together. That's what you want to be looking for. The whole goal of this is going to be maximizing your healing and also maximizing, your impact on the raid. You want to be able to cover all your bases and things like that. So when you're looking at your damage taken by mechanics and things like that, that's always important, especially in relation to other people. So I'm taking like a corrupted breath on this fight because that's what I used to jump in fire and die so that I could use a master spell late in the fight. So that's damage that probably not necessarily should count, but that's something that's going to show on the meters. So if you're saying I used this and I stood in fire to perform a mechanic, kind of keep that in mind when you're judging your damage taken and things like that. So, of course, if you guys like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, share all over. Check out the Twitch channel. Link is in the description. If you have any kind of questions, hit me up in Discord. Also link in the description below. Hope you all enjoy the video. Have a good one, and I'll catch you all next time.